Please raise your hand if you want to be judged for the rest of your life by something that you did when you were 14 years old.
I got about 3 years and 9 months in solitary confinement.
I spent from the time I was 15 to 21 incarcerated.
People think that we're just hard criminals that, have cold hearts and don't have feelings and mess up.
Growing up in Gary, Indiana, I didn't have nobody on my side, and just to have these people on my side, it impacts my life a lot.
When we put them into the system and we leave them in those four walls and we do not give them tools, we have stunted them and we have not given them the opportunity to grow.
We as a community and also the systems that we pay for with our tax dollars have the capacity to make things different. If we can create the political will and we can determine that these young people are not for us to throw away.
We're not monsters. Was it. That's all they need to know.
Over 90% of people who are incarcerated in our state institutions are going to return to their communities, and we make it nearly impossible for them to be successful post-incarceration. We hold them accountable for the rest of their lives for something they did on a very bad day.
We have an epidemic of childhood and adolescent behavior problems. It is increased significantly in the last 15 years. Many, many more children are engaging in behavior that we didn't see before.
The reality of it is that many of the young people that we work with have learned to survive in certain ways, and it's, as far as they're concerned, that's effective.
My mother was in the streets, my dad was in the penitentiary, so I tried to take on being a father figure for my younger siblings.
And I was trying to be on my own, be a grown man at the age of 13 when I was still a little kid. So just doing things I thought grown people did.
Although I was pushed into circumstances, there was times where I could have left out or I could have asked for help. The fear of being denied, I didn't.
Life, growing up, I didn't have everybody around. I didn't have a lot of cousins, family, friends, anything like that. I didn't have nobody around me to support me growing up.
One inmate that we were working with at the Monroe Correctional Facility said, I had no one to disappoint. I had no family relationships. I had no one to stand up for me. I had no one to hold me accountable that I actually cared about. I had no one to disappoint.
If you have a young person who grows up in poverty, maybe mom couldn't afford to buy breakfast or make breakfast, and she's at work because she has to work a couple jobs to pay the cost of living in our region. Maybe there's no hot water at their house. So they go to school and they start misbehaving. They might act out, right? They call security, maybe it gets escalated to the police coming. When you think of these environments, right? PTSD, like the stress that a young person's consistently going through. We're not talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. We're talking about the environment they live in on a daily.
It's more likely that a black and brown young person who commits a crime goes into an institution rather than getting diverted back into the community. Even though the number of youth being institutionalized or detained is decreased, the ratio of black and brown kids has actually increased. So in our country, the response to juvenile crime has a much greater impact on black and brown children.
We are right in the middle of the school to prison pipeline with the kids here. I don't think that's surprising, whether it's trauma that's happening or racial trauma. So you're talking about multi-generational. Kid grows up where, well, I've got 6 uncles at Monroe, and I've had, 2 cousins that are downtown right now, and my dad was always locked up, but I want to change this. That's hard to do.
I felt alone. I felt like it was just me, and that was it.
I was on my own at a very young age. My father cooked methamphetamines dope for a living. My mother sold her children, me, for a living.
Being a part of that gang made me happy. It made me smile. It made me laugh. It made me feel like, oh, they want me here. Being a part of that group, you got to do some crazy stuff to be wanted.
One thing I say to an audience of people is, please raise your hand if you want to be judged for the rest of your life by something that you did when you were 14 years old. I've yet to find anybody who would raise their hand and say that that sense of who they were in that moment permanently labels them as that person.
They had been failed by their families, failed by the foster care system, failed by the education system, failed by the juvenile rehabilitation system, and ended up being incarcerated.
Our interventions still are stuck in the 1970s, 1980s. We have moved so far in our field in terms of research and strategies and ways in which we can improve the lives.
A lot of times in our communities, BIPOC communities to be exact, mental health awareness can be frowned upon. And so a lot of the youth that we're working with in our institutions don't realize that they've experienced some type of trauma in their lives.
Systems aren't rehabilitative, systems aren't restorative. So you have young people who are being housed in a facility away from their community, so they're losing community connections.
And if they're going back to their homes where they're not getting that type of support, they're going to go back to the streets.
Society wants us to be productive members and positive youth and stuff, but how can we be positive youth when we don't have resources? We just get dropped out with no place to stay or back into the same environment with less opportunities.
I think it's important for us to be able to have a voice because it empowers us and it gives us hope. And when someone's empowered and they have hope, they're going to try to walk that right route instead of going the wrong way, which they think is the only option.
Sometimes we wait until somebody is incarcerated before we actually offer the kinds of things that we know would have been helpful to them well before that incarceration happens. You hear people say things like, well, at least in juvenile detention, they'll get 3 square meals and a cot and behavioral health therapy and physical health screenings and health care. The idea that we have to imprison somebody before we offer those things should not be something that we feel proud of.
We spend tens of thousands of dollars to keep a young person locked up in a facility for the duration of time that they're there. And when they're released, none of those resources follow them. They're not getting healing while they're inside, and they're exited out into a world that has no patience or no cadence that will allow them to heal. When do we begin to heal?
I was by myself, and these so-called brothers that I thought I had, they weren't there either. And I guess just over a period of time, man, I just started seeing things for what they were. And it wasn't what I wanted to be anymore.
We're suggesting simply by removing somebody who was suffering in a particular space, putting them in another space, surrounded by other people who were suffering in similar spaces, and then welcoming them back to the very same space that they suffered in, that somehow they're going to begin to thrive and live and engage the world around them differently.
My experience from reentry has been a little rough. Most of us, when we get out, we're on our own. Certain counselors and stuff like that you did have relationships with, you can't really talk to them and stuff.
Prior to being released, I was given 3 months to go work. How am I supposed to get released when I don't even have $100 to my name? Where am I going to live? What am I going to eat? I didn't have a release address at that time. I didn't actually have a release address or anywhere to go up until the last month that I actually got out.
I applied for 24, 5, 6, 7 jobs. And of those 27 jobs, I got 2 interviews. Then they narrowed it down to just 1. They're like, have you ever been convicted of a felon? Yes or no? I put on the box, will discuss upon interview.
We were talking about earlier how you fill out an application and legally you can check no if you've ever been convicted as a felon as a juvenile. And then you get told that you're a liar and a felon. And then it's just, what else are you supposed to do?
And then I showed up my interview. They gave me my office, showed me my hours, asked me the last question, and then said, oh, by the way, it's against our policy to hire you. That is for everybody who's been formerly incarcerated and has a felony and has to check that box.
I think one of the things that's missing in this reentry piece statewide is resources, right? King County is a resource-dense area. But the work that we do statewide, we're in Kitsap County, we're in Yakima County, Spokane. We don't see the same resources.
A family in treatment is a child in treatment. If you treat the guppy and you throw them back in the dirty fishbowl, they just go belly up. But if you clean the fishbowl and you put that guppy back in that fishbowl, they swim and they grow.
We have to believe in the possibility of second chances, and we have to create the policy that will allow people to go on to be contributing members of our society.
How do we get an agency in town working with this kid and set that agency and the kid up for success? What I would love to do is, before release, is have that agency come into here and we could sit down. The three of us could sit down, right? We get the probation counselor in there too if the kid's up for it. You know, we get a whole team. Hey, this is your support team here.
My name is Mug. I'm 23. Born and raised out here in Bremerton. Graduated from Olympic High School. And something about me, I'm an overcomer. I don't believe in obstacles that we can't overcome. You feel me?
You're never going to have enough social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists to work with all these young people. So developing this workforce of lived experience people is incredibly effective.
A lot of the youth that are part of Youth Voice have experience in being in institutions, and we know how it is and what's best for us and what needs to be changed.
Credible messengers is one of the terms used for individuals with lived experience who have been trained to do some of these type of interventions, who've learned some of these cognitive behavioral skills, who've learned how to talk with the youth and help them and coach them on ways in which they can be more effective.
Hello, for those who don't know, scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling a good 10. Northwest Credible Messengers were already connected with my school before I returned. And so by the end of the week of my first week back to school, I attended my first Northwest Credible Messengers. And honestly, it interested me. There was times where there was conflict in school, there was drama, there was kids and classmates not getting along. And I was there for that person. I would say these are some techniques I've had, but Credible Messengers have helped me identify them and better understand that they were there inside and helped me find ways to sharpen my own tools.
There's a culture change that's starting to happen and you guys are seeing it. People are caring about what you have to say on campus, in the facility.
Today's a beautiful day. We're here today to celebrate God's Broken Home University. And it's not about me today, it's about the babies and the kids in our community.
We hope that everyone will circle up around kids who are at risk. And sometimes that's a series of community organizations, not just one. So it's important that we are identifying those warm handoffs so that the young person can have a relationship before they leave us.
I was 18 years old and I recently got out of juvenile prison.
How are we helping them form identity? How are we helping them to be the kind of citizen that they'd like to be? And sometimes that's for the first time in this community that they felt any sense of obligation or responsibility in that community.
When we have them in residence, it's easier to be able to connect them to community because we have their attention.
The criminal justice system is tougher than it used to be. So you're more likely to get started in the system. Once you get started in the system, it is not as easy as it used to be to get it turned around. So you have to have a direction. You have to have an inner core within yourself to say, I'm going to turn this around.
One one of the most effective things we think we could do is map every adult that cares about the outcomes for this young person, whether it be a coach, a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, other extended family, the parents of friends, and create a connected community for that young person to support them, see them, give them encouragement while they are incarcerated, and then as they are returning to community.
Multisystemic therapy, family integrated transitions demonstrates kids who are in institutions, if you work with their families for 4 to 6 months and work with them before their young person has come out of the institution, do all the kinds of figuring out a way of how you get the kid back in school, coaching a parent or a caregiver, we demonstrate these very high reductions in recidivism. We are misallocating resources rather than allocating them in a more effective way to community-based interventions, families, supporting caregivers in the community to allow them really to affect the lives of the young people.
One thing about me is getting my grades up and I'm not till in 8th grade.
I came to this place because there's so much love, you know. Everything's positive around that, and they just really uplift around here, you know. When I'm down, I come here.
People will often talk about wasting money on some of these approaches. Well, none of this stuff works. Well, a lot of this stuff does work. We can show you the data that in fact it does work. So focusing on evidence and really using our resources strategically rather than just paying for things that often have no real outcome. Well, that's the way we've always done it. But in reality, the way we've always done it is not very effective. And we have effective tools. We have effective strategies that can bring about outcomes.
What's up, Jay?
Hey. So I feel like a solid 7 out of 10. What does love feels like? I think about that all the time. I mean, we're here, you know, we got the support, the family. I love you guys.
We hold them accountable for the rest of their lives for something they did on a very bad day. And we have to create the policy that will allow people to go on to be contributing members of our society.
We hope for public safety that we will help them to do something different so that they are able to function in a way that's really helpful to their community and not harmful.
Something has gone wrong somewhere to place them where they are. We have to find that something and we have to redirect it because children are precious and they're good and they're kind and they're smart.
We as a community and also the systems that we pay for with our tax dollars have the capacity to make things different. If we can create the political will and we can determine that these young people are not for us to throw away.
With emotional support, motivational support, and everything positive on your side, all that negativity will go away once you have a support team on your side. It gives you a purpose to do better.
Hope is a powerful thing.